Welcome to the Path to Better A1C podcast. I am your host, Jenny Pena. I am a national board certified health and wellness coach, diabetes prevention program lifestyle coach, founder of GenP Coaching, and creator of the A1C Reset Protocol, which is my 12-week coaching program designed to help busy professional men and women lower their A1C, balance their blood sugar, and regain their energy and focus. Because we know that brain fog and that 3 p.m. slump most science is related to blood sugar. I have a treat for you today. I have a guest that is going to talk about a topic that I have to admit I am a bit intimidated, even though I love all things blood sugar. And I'm going to let her introduce herself. Her name is Melissa, and she's going to share why she's doing what she's doing, what she actually does. But we are going to talk about type 1 diabetes, which is different. And we're going to bring light as to what are the differences, maybe some myths. And we're just going to have a very interesting and insightful conversation. So, Melissa,
Yeah.
the mic
Yeah,
is yours.
great to be here, Jenny. Thanks for inviting me on the show. And this is my favorite topic as well. People hear
Mhm.
diabetes and they think one thing. There's a kind of a stigma around what that is, but there is a difference between type 1 and what you referred as type 2. When I was 14, almost 15, and I'm going to date myself, and I have no problem sharing my age. Back in 1982, I was diagnosed with insulin dependent type 1 diabetes. So that was 44 years ago. A long time to be manually giving myself a hormone, which is called insulin, that the average person who doesn't have a metabolic disease, which I know you're an expert on that, doesn't have to think about. However, it's still very important. I am convinced that with all the studying and living this, disease does start with blood sugar. Or I should say, blood sugar leads to all disease.
Mhm.
And again, we're not scientists or medical doctors, but I know that from people I've helped. The science does prove that. And it's real important. And it's really a great thing that you're doing is educating about blood sugar and creating that awareness. It is funny too, because a lot of people think, okay, well, you live with type 1 diabetes. I'm sorry you have to eat the way you do. And I'm like, I'm not sorry. And in theory, everybody should be eating for blood sugar.
Oh my God, that is exactly what
Right?
I have been sharing
Yes.
that because some people will resist. Well, I'm not diagnosed, even with pre-diabetes.
Mm,
I've had individuals that would come and say, "Well, it's not type 2 yet." And I'm like,
not
"Okay, so
yet.
you're
Right.
waiting?"
Right.
I'm like,
Right.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
understand."
Yeah.
And a lot of people are unaware that having that blood sugar roller coaster, right? And crashing after a meal and
Yes.
feeling like they need a nap or having that brain fog.
Yeah.
We have grown accustomed to it to the point that it's been normalized or connected to
Yeah.
drugs. So,
Yeah.
okay.
We really have to understand the body. I mean, again, it doesn't have to be a science project because I know some things are a little harder to understand, but just the mechanisms of how the body works, how it functions at its optimal, capacity in order to really, so when you talk about the clients or people that that get the pre-diabetes, well, symptoms are good, clues are good, but it's up to us to just say, "So what does this mean?"
Mhm.
What's happening without judgment, but just it's information that we can learn from and build a healthier life on, basically. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So you got diagnosed. What happened? How did you feel? Because I know, again, for type 2 diabetics that I have worked with, they're overwhelmed because
Mm,
first there's an avalanche of information. They feel that it's all about restriction, and that
fortunate.
stresses them out a lot. Like, okay, I cannot eat rice anymore. Like, I work with a lot of Hispanics, and like rice is
Yeah,
part of our culture.
sure.
And you hear all these things like, oh, so I can never, ever have this, or I can never have
Mm,
fruit, or um,
right.
I am doomed to have medication forever. This is something that there is nothing I can do, or even worse, I would say, it impacts even their social life. They feel that they
Yeah,
can never eat out because there's
yeah.
so many decisions that they need to make about what I'm
Mhm,
going to drink, what I'm going to eat,
mhm.
or they don't want to deal with the social pressure.
Yeah,
of people trying to either control what they eat or push things that they are saying no.
absolutely.
And it can be a lot. Now, share a little bit about your story as to, okay,
Yeah.
you got diagnosed. How did that impact you and your family?
Again, this is 1982. So there was little available knowledge or resources available. Again, you really had to dig for it. This was back when we were going to the library and, getting our books with the index. Yeah. So, but that's where we got the information. So we were very isolated.
Mhm,
So I grew up where I just took my insulin shot. So basically, we dose insulin to obviously put insulin into our system. That is what turns our glucose into energy. So it converts. And it's something we manually have to do. I'm going to probably say the word manually, but it's something we have to think and calculate and deliver every single day. We can't take a day off. If you take a day off, your body's gonna feel it. Obviously, if you miss doses, if you miscalculate, the data that we get, with the different devices that we're wearing now, which is golden. Again, we didn't have that back in 1982 either. So, it was a very, kinda detached I was very detached from what diabetes was for me in those days, and my parents unfortunately were as well. We grew up in New England and, we were very poor growing up. It was not the best situation as far as being able to give me the proper medical care. I did not have a glucometer, which is a testing machine to test our blood sugar. They were slowly becoming available on the market, I think in the late or in the mid 1980s. So we were literally peeing on a stick to give us a color range that gave us a sort of an idea of where our glucose was measured at that point in time. I used what I had at the time, the education, which was very, very little at the time. And I just kind of trudged through it for over 10 years. For the next 10 years, I was not associating with what my A1C was. And in most cases, I wasn't going to the doctor regularly. And again, I was definitely, hopefully, on a rare case, but I think it really was that lack of knowledge or understanding of how serious type 1 diabetes is. Insulin is a very powerful hormone,
mhm.
and it needs to be understood and delivered properly and measured properly. So, with God's grace, I did not do anything ill to myself or causing a severe high or low.
Mhm, mhm.
And low blood sugar is more dangerous just based on our capacity and safety. But long term, high blood sugar does accumulate, cause a lot of inflammation, damages a lot of vessels in the body. So at the age of 25, I was newly married, getting up one morning to go to work. I just finished college and I was seeing floaters in my eyes.
Mm,
Again, I've never been to an eye doctor either. So it's just an example of not really good care
mhm,
over my health or my diabetes in those 10 years. So I was diagnosed with diabetic retinopathy, which was from basically high blood sugars for many, many years that I didn't understand. I didn't have the data, the feedback to tell me that what I was doing for 10 years was not staying in a good, healthy range. So,
yeah, that's
yeah,
why I like to share so much. Check your A1C, talk to your doctor. If you're feeling like this, talk to your doctor and
yeah,
see if you need to pay attention. Some labs may be normal, but now that you have the access to see the historical data, you can see if something is trending up, and that should be
changed.
a marker to be
Right.
like, okay. The same thing with the diabetes plate. And I can say, I'm like, everybody should eat like that. This is not
Yeah.
just for diabetics. Like,
So
it's, you
true.
should find that balance. You're going to feel better. They see it and they're like, oh, wait a minute. I do feel much better. I'm not craving as many sweets. I'm more focused. I get more things done at work.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's a huge realization. And but if you don't have that information, you almost normalize it. Now, you're a health coach. How did that journey went from you finished college, you're newly married, you're managing your diagnosis, the best you could at that point. And for those that
Yeah.
are younger, you have no clue. When we didn't have as much access to certain things, you had to go to the library to do your projects.
Mhm.
Information was not that readily available with the
Right.
online libraries that we have now. But
That is so
um,
true.
how did that transfer into having a podcast, being a
It was a slow process. That immediate diagnosis at 25 years old shook me, as you can imagine, because the ophthalmologist that I saw at that day, he told me glucose is obviously something that is pointing to this. So I had to get on board with learning this disease now. Fear of going blind, basically, because my eyes were not going to keep up with high blood sugars on a continuous basis. So I went from, which is interesting because I went from 0 to 60. I went from not knowing and understanding to maybe too much thought on it. And I ended up where I was years of having a really bad relationship with my numbers because, again, fearing going blind. And I was extremely tight with my control, meaning when I was dosing, and I did have a glucometer at this time, so I got on board with the tools, which is real important because you can't make good decisions without the data and the information and
mhm,
that feedback.
mhm.
And so the pendulum swung, and now I was really toting the line with low blood sugars. So I had many, many, many 911 calls, emergency calls, just mishaps with trying to kind of tote that line way too strict. That went on for years. I went on in 1996. So this was about 4 years after my eyes were now healthy. My A1C was in better range. And I got pregnant with my daughter, Sarah. She's now 30 years old, but it was a lot of stress on my marriage, a lot of apologies to my daughter who over the years had to step in and help mom. So what happened was I decided that I wanted to. I've always had a love for fitness and not that I think I always loved healthy food, but I did not know what healthy food was. So I learned a lot. And it was funny when I was pregnant with her is when I first learned about how to balance food. Would you believe it took almost 11 years for anybody, the dietitian I work with? I still remember sitting in her office and learning that, and the light bulb went off. I'm like, oh, she was preparing me for obviously it was considered a high risk pregnancy when you have type 1 and just getting me ready. And I was like, oh, well, gee, nobody told me this. And so years later, I continued obviously to eat this way and to prepare my food this way, and everybody should be eating that way. It's not restriction, it really is understanding the foods and how you specifically are going to process it. There's a lot of other factors too that you know as well, Jenny, that go into our blood sugar, whether it's stress, the cortisol, sleep, hydration, movement, strength training, all those factors, which those of us with type 1 have to factor in along with
Mhm.
our insulin dose. So it really is math problems throughout the day, figuring it out and doing the best we can. There's not perfection. It's really making our best decision around how much insulin we need at any given time. And then just kind of watching to see how it goes, basically.
How
Um,
how did you manage? Because one thing I know with type 2, and it sounds like with type 1 that obviously there's a lot more data to monitor, like because now you need to make sure that you're administering the insulin, which is an element that type 2 diabetics, most of them, not all of them,
Loss, right?
like they don't have necessarily to deal with, at least most of the ones that I have worked with.
Yeah,
But
you're right.
how do you manage the burnout? Because when you were
Mm,
talking, the first word that came to mind was like, that must be tiring
yeah,
to constantly have something. And as you said, I cannot take a day off, really.
that,
Your life depends on it,
yeah.
literally.
Yeah,
So,
ideally, we have to be not attached to our data or our information, but we have to be very conscientious about where we are. Again, to live our best life, or whether we're gonna, be taking a bike ride, or if we're attending a concert and it's going to be a social setting, if we're traveling, all these different variables that we really have to understand what our what our trends typically are. And anytime you get out of your routine, I'm a big advocate of routine because our body likes routine, not boring, just consistency. And it really is. It does make managing blood sugar with insulin dependent diabetes type 1 a whole lot easier when you are consistent with your habits. Strict, but consistent. I know,
Mhm.
there's a
Mhm.
fine line there with it controlling you,
Mhm.
but we don't want it to control us or our decisions or our choices to go to a restaurant or to travel. But we have to respect what our hand is in the whole process and how important it is for us to pay attention. And ultimately, whatever we're doing is going to be more enjoyable. We can avoid the burnout, which is a very common thing
Mhm.
in my
Mhm.
community. And that's another reason why I coach too, because I get it. I get it. This is something that we carry with us. It's not our identity, but it's very much attached to what we do every day. Yeah.
What would be something, because I know that a lot of listeners and even followers on Instagram, they message me not necessarily because they were diagnosed, but a family member was diagnosed.
Okay.
As somebody that is living with type 1, what are some ways that you will say, okay, this would be some ways that you can better support your loved one without adding to that burnout or
That's a good one.
adding pressure to it? What are you
Yeah.
eating? Like, you're not
Yeah.
supposed to do that.
Yeah.
What would be something that you will share that be like, oh, approach it this way?
What's the best way to approach those yeah, relationships is really that can get very entangled with that, and, it is, when we have people in our lives, whether we live with them or we spend a lot of time with them, they care,
Mhm.
they're curious, they wanna help. I think communication is the number one thing, they say that for all relationships is to talk about it, to share what you need from them, and then slowly to educate or maybe to even demonstrate or show what you're doing, whether it's around a meal or an exercise session or whatever. So along the way, they can feel like they're part of it. And I think what happens is and it depends on the relationship. I know the parent child that's difficult
Mhm.
because, there's a difference in maturity and, the abilities of really being able to carry on with, taking care of yourself.
Mhm.
But I really think it really is about setting those expectations that are manageable for both the person managing it and the person that's trying to support the person
Yeah.
managing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially for
Yeah.
the
'Cause
parents, like, I would
yeah.
say find ways of bringing balance and filling your cup, because now that task of monitoring things,
Yeah.
it's most likely falling on you because the child
Mhm.
is not mature enough to do it on
Yeah.
their own, right?
Yeah. It's very hard.
That is
Yeah.
interesting. Now,
Mhm.
are there any misconceptions, things that probably people assume about type 1 that are not really true?
Yeah. We hear diabetes and what's the first thing people think? Oh, they can't have sugar,
Yep.
right?
No more
Um,
carbs. Like, don't eat
right.
sugar ever.
Right. Or in some cases, because I know I've got people in my circle that they're around us sometimes, but they still don't get it. When it comes to carbohydrates, like you say, they think it's just the sweet tea. They just think we have to avoid the chocolate, which is interesting because I love dark chocolate. So that's not something I avoid. I just find a way to weave it in. But I think that is the conception is diabetes is sugar, and people don't understand that carbohydrates, like
Mhm,
turn to sugar.
mhm,
So it is the pasta, the breads, the rice, the cereals that we've gotta be very aware of and how they are made, the way that they're packaged, just so we understand how the body is going to absorb that sugar, process it, and really how much insulin is gonna be needed. I think it's just that misconception of exactly what it means for us. And, another thing that I think happens, I coach and I know a lot of people with diabetes, type 1 diabetes, is sometimes people don't get it because we don't necessarily show it. I mean, you can see, like, if you see my arm, you can
mhm,
see I've got my insulin pump and then I've got my CGM right here. So they can see the devices. They can see that there's work involved. They may see us taking an injection, because I used to be on injections, doing multiple daily injections. but they don't really see it. They don't really understand all the
Mhm.
decisions and the mental load that just wearing the devices, they think, "Oh, it must be
Like, it's
easy."
automatic and you don't have to do any
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah, the insulin pump's doing all the work for you. So I think that's the biggest disconnect is not understanding how food and blood sugar respond to the
Yeah,
body and
yeah,
how much hands-on it really is. Even if we're wearing a pump, it's still very mind on.
yep. And
There's a lot of thinking involved.
I had a
Yeah.
client that it was so funny. I mean, he gave me permission and I'm like, "I'm gonna share your story." He's like, "Yeah, sure," so that other people don't make the same mistake. He ended up developing type 2 diabetes. Now he's on remission, right? And, like, he has good
Okay.
levels. But
Okay.
when we started working, he was a pre-diabetic, very close to the diabetes, range, right? And
Mhm.
we were going over what he was eating, and I'm like, "Okay." We went through the diabetes plate and how you balance your meal. He's like, "Yeah, but in the morning I'm not eating any sugar. All I'm eating is a big, fruit salad." And I'm like, "Okay, you're not having added sugar." And it was true. A lot of his meals were not processed, but they
Mhm.
were not balanced. So I
Yeah.
had to
Yeah.
explain to him, "Okay, you need to include the fiber, include healthy fats, include
Yeah.
protein. Your body
Yeah.
reacts differently."
Yeah.
And that was the light bulb. He had already eliminated trying to remedy it.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna eliminate all of these processed foods, which actually helped, but the part of having that great proportion to avoid that blood sugar spike, that is what
Mhm.
really creates
Yeah.
all these other,
Yeah.
underlying issues.
Mhm.
Couldn't understand, he didn't have that information. So
Yeah.
he started balancing it, and I'm like, "Okay, like, how are we gonna add some protein here? How are we gonna
Yeah.
add some
Right.
and mimic that balance plate?" And now he's doing amazing, like, he was able to
Yeah.
actually put it in remission. Then you
That's
have the
right.
individuals that think that they should never ever have any fruits, any,
Mhm.
carbohydrates, and I'm like, "Oh,
Now
it's
there's
not about
ways
that,
to.
like, you still need it for energy."
Yeah.
So let's think about how to find that balance. And
Yeah.
plus, you will get burned out when you're having this very restrictive
That's
diets.
so
I've seen
true.
people
Yeah.
trying, and it may give you temporary results, and you may look at the
Success. Right.
numbers,
Right.
but then is it sustainable? And that's what I tell
Yeah.
them. I'm like, "Can you live and eat this way for the rest of your life? Think about a
Right.
marriage without the option of divorce. Can you marry this lifestyle?" And then they have to think about it. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, maybe not. I'm like, let's find something that you can see yourself doing even when you're 80.
Forever, right, that feels good forever, yeah, 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 and that's a perfect example, believe it or not, there's many of us, like I was sharing, I was growing up not understanding what I was eating and the impact of my blood sugar and the elevation and the fact that my insulin was not being dosed accordingly, so yeah, information is power, and having a good relationship with food, like you mentioned, I think is so important as well, because we don't want to, avoid or have an aversion to certain foods based on what we think, it could do to our blood sugar or how we feel, so really
Yeah,
good, yeah.
absolutely. Now, tell us a little bit about what you do, what you're passionate about.
Mhm.
I checked your website. All your information is going to be on the show notes. So if people want to connect with
Yeah.
you, anybody either is, managing type 1 diabetes and they need support, or maybe a family member, and
Mhm.
you are also a fellow podcast host, so go follow, subscribe, but share a little bit of what you're doing now.
Well, I've been coaching for a little over 10 years now, so I kind of did a detour from my business world, which actually helps when we are and I know you can appreciate this, when you're owning your own business and doing all of that. So that definitely has played into helping that. It's interesting. I didn't actually target more of women with diabetes up until about 4 or 5 years ago. So I was trying to help everybody. And I think I was doing an okay job at that. But it took me a while for it to zone in. And I had a friend of mine that told me that. She's like, "This is your expertise. You've been doing this a long time. You figured it out. You need to mentor and help other women." So that's what I'm doing. So I do one-on-one coaching. I have a group coaching, which I love. We have a circle of women that come in. We meet every week on Zoom, and I provide a lot of resources and topics, and we are living life together with diabetes type 1. So all ages and stages, although primarily most of them, their hormonally stages is really where it's all headed for them. So I am now post menopause. So I'm 59 years old, and I didn't even understand what perimenopause was when I was in it. And I mean, the light bulb again, another light bulb went off when I was in my early 50s, when I really discovered the hormonal impact of estrogens is one of the major ones when it comes to blood sugar. And I think this might be something that you've shared with your audience and your followers here, Jenny, but how impactful estrogen is on
Mhm.
the the ability of the body to process and utilize insulin. So this is profound for those of us, again, that have to measure and dose every day of the week. So it's like falling off a cliff for some women. The the changes and then demands in our need for insulin. And along with that, we're still going through the hormonal symptoms or the low hormonal symptoms that many women, all women, go through generally after the age of 40. And that's really where I knew that was my calling, and that's what I'm doing right now. And my podcast is all about that type 1 in midlife and beyond because, 40-ish, I don't even know what midlife is. I know it's such a general term, but 40-ish, and then I don't even know when it ends, but it's all relative. And then I have a book that I'm just now launching. It'll be on the shelves here probably early May. I'm not sure when this is going to be aired, but this is another tool. So again, I put all my knowledge, my experience, and my resources into a book to guide women from their menstrual cycles to menopause with more ease,
Mhm.
because I really wanted to save them from really the misdiagnosis I was getting. It I mean, it's all in the book. It's just crazy what I suffered with not knowing that it was really hormonal driven. And just to advocate for hormone therapy, I am a very big advocate of that. It's a lot of what I teach and talk about and refer to as far as finding a practitioner that women can lean on and to go to and to advocate for this because it is a game changer with insulin dependent diabetes. Another thing to consider is their diagnosis of prediabetes type 2 does happen in midlife. Based on
Yeah,
that
for the
that
most part.
change, it
Yeah.
is all connected, and again, if we don't understand that or can anticipate that happening I work with women locally that, do not live with type 1 diabetes, but they come to me because they're 40-ish, they're putting on weight, they can't sleep.
Mhm.
The
I
doctor
can
says, "My"
understand.
Yeah, my doctor says, "Oh, my A1C is going up." My fasting blood sugar is 110, 115. They want it down below maybe about 95 is I don't know, they just keep changing that number, but anyway, they're seeing the signs of what's happening hormonally. And again, there's definitely foundational lifestyle things that are driving
Mhm.
those numbers and how they're feeling, but it's so connected. It's very much connected with perimenopause and the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes for women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know that one thing that I'm noticing, because obviously, like a lot of people will start seeing again pre-diabetes, diabetes, 35,
Yeah.
40. That's when you start seeing things.
Yeah.
But now you're seeing more women with PCOS, again,
Yes.
hormones.
Yes.
And now they're having that insulin resistance. They're having
Yes.
difficulty losing weight
Yes.
because the insulin is like the fat hormone. If you have it elevated for long, it triggers your body to, okay, we need to store fat.
Store fat.
So that's why it's so hard. And some ladies will come and be like, I have not changed my eating habits. I'm doing all these
Mhm.
things.
Mhm.
Why is the scale going up? I don't
Mhm.
understand. And it is all hormonal related. So
Yeah.
I love the
Yeah.
fact that you're helping so many women with that because now we're all kind of like, okay, it's something
Yeah.
that it's happening even more. I feel like a lot of us are developing insulin resistance way earlier. Most of my
Fortunately.
audience know my story. Like I was diagnosed with PCOS and pre-diabetes and I was not 30 because I had some hormonal issues. My lifestyle habits were not the greatest. Working in Wall Street, like working long hours, stress levels. I was doing everything that we typically have as a guidance for
Yeah.
individuals to support their health and wellness. I was doing the opposite. It was just I was
Uh,
living a crazy life because I felt that that's what I needed to do to invest in my career. And
understood.
then my health suffered, and looking through
Yeah.
that journey, then here I am, like, doing health coaching, which
Yeah.
I feel so joyful to do and help others. But,
Mhm.
okay, one last thing
Mhm.
before we close. I would love for you to share what is one morning routine that you have, and I know you mentioned routines earlier, so
Yes,
you have a
yes.
routine. What is that one treat? And if there is one tip, if you didn't listen to anything that we just shared, but you would love to have this one thing, leave with that one thing from this podcast, what would that be?
Oh, wow, just one thing.
Well,
Well,
you can add a
yes.
couple if you want.
Okay. Well, the morning routine is very, very I'm very routine. You could set your clock to me in the morning. I'm usually up at between 6:30, 6:45, sometimes earlier if I have to be. Um, Water with lemon, um, I didn't mention that I'm on hormone therapy, so I put my testosterone on the inside of my leg. This all happens within a minute, and then, the coffee's brewing, where so I'm drinking my coffee, getting my water down, and then I sit. My husband lives with type 1 diabetes as well. I'm just tossing that into the equation here. So it's interesting. Yeah. So two of us are both managing this. So we're very, very blessed. We live on the water and we have this amazing window, especially if it's a beautiful morning. This week has been just amazing in Florida and we can sit and see the glow of the sunlight coming on the water and just seeing nature out there. And we sit and have our coffee. We get into the Bible in the morning. That is my ritual. I spend 30 minutes reading. Right now, I'm in the book of Matthew, and yeah, it's just I think that's it gets my mind
Mhm.
and it sets my day. It really does because I get to do that, and I'm very thankful for, those things and those things I have available to me. And, one thing I didn't mention is, I have to check my blood sugar too. So again, when I get up out of the day, it's an obvious thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our CGM, our continuous glucose monitor, it has an app that's on my phone. So unfortunately, I got to kind of turn my phone on first thing in the morning. I don't actually we don't sleep with our phones in our bedroom. We try to keep the devices in another room. So we come out and we see it and adjust accordingly if anything needs to happen with insulin as we're waking up. Sometimes we all have that cortisol spike as upon
Mhm.
awakening. I've been really good lately, knock on wood. I haven't had to do that or adjust anything upon waking,
Okay.
but you just never know. So, but yeah, that's how I start my day. And then I take the dog for a walk. I'm getting that morning sun in my face as long as the sun's up that day and taking it in before I start work. So, and
Okay. So
yeah.
what about the treat? Because I know you mentioned chocolate earlier, but what is
Oh,
that one treat that you're like, "Oh, this."
I do love dark chocolate at night. So after dinner is when we take out our dark chocolate. We each get a chunk of it. Yeah, yeah, that's our
That's my
treat.
favorite too.
I do.
That's my
Yeah,
favorite too.
yeah.
Okay, and like one last tip before we close.
Yeah. Something I don't think we talked a lot about blood sugar. And again, I am assuming because I know you share a lot of value with
Mm,
your listeners
yes.
here, Jenny, is how important fasting insulin levels are. So that could be a caveat that maybe they're not used to having tested. I know
Mhm.
locally doctors are starting to understand what that value means, what to do with it, what it's pointing to, but it's an interesting marker to keep an eye on
Okay.
because it really is a true test of how your body's metabolizing because obviously we want those insulin levels lower
Yeah.
than
It's something
higher.
that I feel that even with my own PCP doctor, right? Or because you always monitor and I'm like, okay, like why is it? She's like, well, typically like we feel that it's enough to do the A1C. And that was her
No,
take,
it's not.
right? I mean, like her professional take.
Yeah, I know.
But she actually said like, but if somebody comes and asks, like I don't have a problem adding that to the lab order. So what I would say, next time you go to the doctor,
Yeah.
just add that. Say,
Yes,
I
yes,
am curious. And she
yes,
knows me because sometimes I will do the same thing
yeah,
and say, "Okay, I'm curious about this. Can we please check on this?" And we have the conversation as to why. Take ownership of your health. Like sometimes we're
yeah,
intimidated by having that
yeah,
conversation, but the
yeah.
doctor is there to support you. And I know that the system, at least here in the US, it can be a little taxing because they don't have as much time. They have a lot
They're
of patients
right.
they need to see,
Yeah,
and I guess that's why us as health coaches, we bridge that gap, but we're able to
that's right.
support everyone. But make sure you ask if it's truly important, go do some research and then go like, what about this?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
really have that conversation.
Yeah,
Okay. Also,
absolutely. Yes. Just something else to advocate for. And it begins with knowledge and learning and understanding why it's important and why it differs and what that lab value is going to tell you that an
mhm,
A1C does not tell you. So it's important. And I know they can follow up with you on the rest of that because I know you know
yes,
the answers to all
absolutely.
that. But that's empowering. That's really
Yeah.
taking ownership and really understanding how the body's working
Okay.
even deeper, right?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa. I know that everybody had a lot of great information. And if you have any questions, all her information is going to be on the podcast episode description box. And feel free to
Mhm.
reach out to me to her. I mean, she is the expert in terms of health coaching and type 1, especially if you're in that menopause,
That's a
perimenopause, and to understand all the hormones. She's definitely like the person to go to. And be on the watch for that book that is coming soon.
That's
Oh,
right. Well,
awesome.
thank you so much for your time too, Jenny. We share this passion and it's real important. It's real important that we get on here together and talk about it. So thanks again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like turning our own journey into something that will help others
Mm,
so that their
that's right.
journey may not be as cumbersome
Hard,
as
right.
I
That's
had to
right.
go through so many different things to figure out,
Mhm.
okay, this is not working. And I
Yeah.
joke and I say, I even used GLP-1s when they were not trendy. When they were really not all out there, and even
Mhm.
that didn't work. Like, it was really
Mm.
about lifestyle habits and finding that balance. That what actually ended up helping
Awesome.
with my A1C levels.
Really
Have an
good.
amazing rest of the week. Remember,
You
if you
too.
found this helpful, subscribe if you're not subscribed. Every Friday morning, we have a brand new episode, and it's just demystifying a lot of these science, making it simple terms so that you can take action and improve your health. So have an amazing rest of your week.